Here at the Met Office this Thursday morning, the 2nd of April, we have named Storm Dave, which will be impacting northern parts of the UK through the Easter weekend, particularly so on Saturday afternoon and through Saturday night. Now, Storm Dave won't be affecting all parts of the UK. Much of the south and east won't really be impacted by the storm. It'll just bring some gusty conditions for a time. But where this storm does affect the UK, as I said, particularly across the north, it is likely to cause some disruption. In this video, we'll be going through why we've named the storm, what could happen with it, and all the warnings. If you're watching this on YouTube, do hit subscribe because we'll be keeping you updated right the way throughout the Easter weekend. Okay, let's take a look at the bigger picture and what's going on. We'll start with a satellite image where we've got lots of cloud brewing up out in the mid-Atlantic. If we fast forward to the time of recording and through Thursday morning, we've got this stream of cloud, this line across the middle of the Atlantic. That is cirrus high cloud. It's indicative of where we've got the jet stream lying. And of course, that is the key player in all of this, the jet stream, that fast-moving ribbon of air high up in the atmosphere that tends to dictate our weather patterns. Now, it's fairly lively, but it's kind of in this east-west mode, not really developing things too much. But what is also happening at the same time is some very cold air is plunging its way south from the Arctic down the eastern side of Canada, and that is driving its way southwards, meeting the warmer air across the tropics, and where they clash, well, it's that temperature clash which tends to fuel the jet stream and intensifying. So this cold air pushing south, the warmer air staying in place, and that is going to intensify the jet stream. And let's move through the next 24 hours or so. What that does is it drives the colder air even further south and tends to develop this trough, this dip in the jet stream, kind of almost breaking into two arms with this dip in here, and that is vital for what happens next. If we stop it there Friday morning and take the jet stream off, you can see we've got this barrier. This is where we've got this gradient, this warm air to the south, the cold air, and where they meet, that's the breeding ground for areas of low pressure. Coupled with that and the shape of the jet stream, what we've got now, instead of that steady path going across, we've now got this kind of arc of it up here. And now down here, where we've got the temperature contrast, and we've also got what's called a right entrance to this kind of jet streak, if you like. So that pulse of the jet here, this is a right entrance, and that is a breeding ground for areas of low pressure. And if we just go through what happens next, we can see that low pressure here, it doesn't look much, but if we just focus in a little bit on it and zoom in, you can see that what happens is we really see this area developing. These weather fronts become an actual area of low pressure, which again doesn't look particularly intense. We can actually put the central pressure on there. It's 1,005 hectopascals at 10 o'clock on Friday night. But if we fast forward to 24 hours later, zoom out a little bit, you can see that low has now really intensified as it approaches the west of Ireland. A lot of isobars now popping out of it, really squeezing together across the south. That is really where it starts to intensify again. And by the time we get to Sunday morning, early hours of Sunday morning, it's a proper deep area of low pressure crossing through Scotland. And now the central pressure on that is much lower, dropping down to 970 hectopascals. So it's dropping more than 30 hectopascals in that time period, intensifying. That's what we call rapid cyclogenesis or explosive cyclogenesis. So we have that first element of it. If we just run that back, it's a kind of double effect of the jet stream. So we've got this first pulse as it crosses from the right entrance, but then as it gets into this zone here, it's now what we call in the left exit. We've got this jet stream streak here, and it's now going into this area here, which is the left exit. So that's why it develops further as it comes in across Scotland. So it's a rapidly developing low as it approaches the UK. And that's quite a deep low. For this time of year, quite unusual to see that. It's got that kind of double phase of deepening to go through, which is adding a little bit to the uncertainty. So it's hard to pin down exactly where it's going to be because there's a lot going on. But at this stage, we are particularly concerned about the strength of the wind as it moves its way in across through. Let's take that off. As it moves its way in, we can take the temperatures off, but as it moves its way in there across Scotland during the course of Saturday afternoon and also then into Sunday, particularly there as it moves its way. Look at the squeeze on the isobars there. So some strong winds coming in around that. So let's take a look at the winds first of all, and what we're expecting with those. If we look at how they're going to develop, it'll be quite breezy on Friday for many places, but then as we go into Saturday, so this is Saturday evening, notice there's the low. You can see it tracking across to the north of Northern Ireland. On this flank of it, there's some strong gusty winds that come into the west of Northern Ireland, but also ahead of it up through the Irish Sea, we're looking at gusts of 50 to 60 miles an hour coming in here. So that's the first pulse through the course of Saturday. Notice there the northwest of Wales, even further south, some gusts along that coast likely to intensify. And then there's the low as it moves its way further north on Saturday night into Sunday morning. You get that pulse of strong winds also through central Scotland, then up the eastern side of Scotland, and then as it moves out and it develops even further as it goes up across the Northern Isles, you get this back edge of it pushing in those gusty winds with gusts of 60, 70, perhaps in exposed areas, maybe even 80 miles an hour. Notice the stronger winds in that they're mostly offshore. So when we're talking about the winds affecting populated areas, it needs to be across the land, obviously. But some of the strongest winds are out to sea. But still, around the coast in these areas, we are potentially going to see gusts of 70 to perhaps even 80 miles an hour. And then as we go through Sunday, it all kind of moves its way away. By Sunday afternoon, it's a breezy afternoon. But yeah, mostly across northern parts of the UK, those strong winds starting across through the Irish Sea and Northern Ireland Saturday afternoon, then moving across Scotland Saturday night, clearing away on Sunday morning. So that's the wind. Then we've also got an element of snow involved with this. This is the freezing level that we're looking at, which is basically how high up in the sky you've got to go before you get to 0 Celsius. And on Saturday, we've got the freezing level here, these blue zones, 800 metres, 600 metres, but across much of Scotland, it's about 400 metres. So as that low comes in, 400 metres, so if the freezing level's at 400 metres, you can tend to get snow down lower than that because it'll continue to fall as snow even though the temperature is slightly above freezing. So if the freezing level's about 400 metres, if it's intense enough, you can get snow down to about 200 metres. So that's what we're concerned about as that system comes in terms of the amount of snow we're looking at. Again, fast forward that, let's zoom in across Scotland. And this area here, maybe a little bit overdone, but certainly over the hills, we're looking at 10 to 20 centimetres of snow, with the orange speckling in there as we move through Saturday. And at lower levels, well, we may not see much at all, but above about 200 metres, we could easily see 10 centimetres of snow. And that is quite significant because this is Saturday. A lot of people are going to be travelling away for the Easter weekend. It's not just where the snow accumulates and builds up, not expecting much of that at low levels, but falling snow with those strong winds. That's blizzard. So driving through these conditions on Saturday evening across the western half of Scotland, but even perhaps further south, not going to be very pleasant indeed. So that is another factor that we need to take into account, the fact that there is some snow. So let's take a look at what the warnings we have in place across the UK. If we fast forward to Saturday afternoon, the first warning comes in place across Northern Ireland, and then through the rest of Saturday we have wind warnings for Northern England, Southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, bigger wind warning across Scotland, a smaller snow one embedded in there across the northwest, and then because it's a bit later on, not until Easter day, till Sunday, we have that warning, yellow warning in place across the Northern Isles of Scotland, by which time the wind should be easing in Northern Ireland. But let's just go back to those warnings, zoom in a little bit, take the snow one off for now. So that Northern Ireland warning, those wind picking up through Saturday afternoon and into the evening time, gusts of wind of 60, perhaps in exposed areas 70 miles an hour. Similar kind of numbers we're talking about for this warning here across southern Scotland, northern England and North Wales. 60 miles an hour, 50, 60 miles an hour quite widely, but the possibility, particularly on coast and depending on how that low develops, 70 mile an hour gusts are possible here. And this broader yellow warning across much of central and northern Scotland, that's where we're most likely to see disruption, I suspect, with gusts of 60, 70 miles an hour quite widely, again, depending on the track. But there is the possibility, particularly around northern Scotland, of those gusts being more than that, 80 to perhaps even 90 mile an hour gusts. Those kind of winds are likely to cause some disruption. Power lines could cause some structural damage, bringing down trees, that kind of thing. So that is why we issued these warnings in advance. Further south, I say those winds of 60, 70 miles an hour, certainly likely to cause some travel disruption. A lot of people travelling, as I've mentioned. Ferries going to be affected. The bridges across Scotland also likely to be affected. There is a chance of power cuts. So just, if you can, prepare yourself for this storm system moving in through Saturday and into Saturday night. Lots of good advice on the Met Office website about how to prepare, but just being ready for power issues. Make sure you've got some candles, making sure you've got a battery pack for your phone, that kind of stuff. And if you can, ahead of time, pack any garden furniture away that you have. People may have already put their trampolines out for the summer, so make sure they're packed away and safe as well, because these kind of winds, as I said, are likely to cause some disruption. And then, as I say, those stronger winds then move in across the Northern Isles. We've got a yellow warning here for gusts of 70, perhaps 80, maybe 85 miles an hour in exposed parts of the Northern Isles. So that is a breakdown of those weather warnings, and that's what we're most concerned about as we go through Saturday night and into Sunday morning. There's lots of advice, and all the great details of those warnings are on the Met Office website and on the Met Office app as well. So you can check out for yourself if you are in those weather warnings. Large parts of the country down here are not in those weather warnings as they stand. There is still some scope for that storm to shift a little bit, so do keep up to date with the forecast. But large, heavily populated areas, we're not expecting too much disruption. It'll just be a bit breezy, and there will be some sunshine around through the course of the weekend, particularly as we head through Sunday and into Bank Holiday Monday also. We'll be having an update. Will be a full weekend forecast available on our YouTube channel by Thursday afternoon. So if you've got plans this weekend, you want to be watching that. But I say this is mostly about Storm Dave. Just re-emphasising the fact that large parts of the south and east won't really be affected by this. It will just be a little bit windy. So as I said at the start, please do subscribe, hit the thumbs up button as well. If you've liked this, leave us a comment if you've got any questions about the weather, and we'll try and answer some of those also. But just be aware that Storm Dave is coming in, and it's likely to bring some pretty lively weather through the course of the Easter weekend.